I will.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure.
Yep, I appreciate it. Okay. Looks like we are ready to go. Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, November 19th. This is the governing board meeting for Litchfield Elementary School District. Meeting is officially called to order. Today we have a very short agenda. We will be talking about fiscal year 2020 school level annual financial reports. And Wendy Qualls will be doing a presentation today. So Wendy, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, President Clymer, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, and the public. Thank you for taking the time to attend this meeting. So today we have the school level annual financial reports for fiscal year 2020. This report is a portion of the report that was approved back on October 13th, our annual financial report. However, detailed information was needed from Department of Ed to calculate revenues by school. Therefore, the deadline was changed till November 20th for this information. So the school level report card has more, or this report has more information than prior years. So I just want to share my screen with you and go over one of the reports. So this is the annual financial report for Barbara Roby. Can everyone see my screen?
Okay. Yes, we can, or I can.
All right. So the top portion of this is the expenditures that are allocated to Barbara Roby. So I had to take expenditures that were coded at a department or district level and allocate that out to the school so we could get a true representation of the cost to operate each school. So you have the different functions going down on the left. So instructional being anything that was in the classroom, and then support services for our students, instructional staff, general admin. Those categories go on down to the left. And then going across, you have salaries, benefits, purchase services, your supplies, properties, and dues and fees. And then you have grand totals over here on the right. One of the other items they wanted districts to report is by school, the cost for our certified teachers, our certified substitutes, and then any contracted teachers or substitutes and the related benefits. The next section down is the portion of the teacher that was funded from federal grants, and then also our instructional salaries, instructional aid salaries. Classroom site fund. You can see here that all of our funds for the classroom site fund is in salary and benefits for our instructional staff. So that's classroom teachers only. The next section looks at the revenues. So this top portion, revenues generated by student, is all calculated by Department of Education, and it's based on the number of students at each school. So for example, at Barbara Roby, the maintenance and operation fund, which is your base support, the district additional assistance, classroom site fund, instructional improvement, and Prop 123 funds for Barbara Roby that equal just over $3.4 million. I also had to allocate the revenues based on expenditures for items such as the transportation funding. So Barbara Roby's portion is $151,000. Also the override, just about $470,000 for Barbara Roby. Grants here that are state grants generally are going to be our school facilities board improvements that were made, and then other grants of $8,000 for Barbara Roby. I'm sorry. The next section is they look at other state and local funds. And again, we broke down the tax credit and donations by school. The school lunch sales, so this would be what was paid for a program, so a paying student lunch, breakfast, and then other items such as school plants, auxiliary operations, different fees. That was about $161,000 for Barbara Roby. In the next column over is federal revenues. So child nutrition programs, this is the funding from the federal government for the lunches and breakfasts, 251,000. And then other grants, 338,000. That could be Title I, IDEA funds for preschool or special ed. So then what you can do is, this is showing the revenues that were generated for Barbara Roby, and you can compare that to the top, which was the expenditures. So for example, if we look at student transportation, the expenditures were 308,000, but the revenues were only 151. So our transportation costs are higher than the revenue that's being generated. You can
Wendy,
also,
can you go through that one more time? Can you just highlight, so show me where you see the transportation revenue?
the transportation is right here, this 308.
Okay.
Okay. And if we come down here and we look at the transportation funding, it's 151.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we can do the same thing with the school lunch program. So we have 64,000 that the parents paid for lunches, plus 251,000 from the federal reimbursements. So we're around 320,000. And if we go up here and we look at food service, the expenditures were 276. So on this campus, our food service is breaking even or more than breaking even on the Barbara Roby campus. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
And then we can look at total local and state revenues down here. It's about 4.3 million that was generated for Barbara Roby. And if we look back up here in the expenditures again, we have to add three numbers together. The 4,468,000, the 31,020. So that you would then compare the total of those three to what was generated at Barbara Roby. So again, their expenditures are higher than the state and local funds that were created based on their average daily membership.
And where does that difference come from?
So the difference is when we're budgeting, we budget at a district level. So we don't budget a certain dollar amount for Barbara Roby and they have to stay within that budget. We do the salaries the same for everybody across the district. So everything's done based on expenditures, not necessarily on how much revenue was generated. So you're going to have some schools that we're making money and you're going to have some that are losing money. Right?
Okay, but because you're saying because we're planning at the 30,000 foot level, we're planning for all students and all staff and all campuses, and we're not necessarily breaking it down by revenue that's generated per student per campus kind of thing.
Right.
Gotcha.
So when we're doing the budget side, we don't. If we look at the revenues for federal revenues, Barbara Roby was about 590,000. Actually, let's look only at this number, 338,000. And if we go back up here and look at line 14, 567,000 was spent at Barbara Roby out of federal funds.
Wendy, how does that work exactly in terms of the federal funds? I know those are different because, you know, the Title I or, you know, whether they're, you know, special ed, IDEA, whatever those funds are, aren't they sort of generated by the students or the category of students that fit into that? So how would we be able to spend those funds differently, like at a district level, if they're allocated per sort of student that qualifies?
So for Title I and IDEA, we do receive revenues based on the student counts, but it's not technically allocated by school. It's another one that's done at the district level. So then we determine, there's another formula for Title I to determine how much each school gets that qualifies. So what I really was looking at is expenditures to determine how much revenue to allocate to them. And I'm sorry, we should be comparing the line 14 to this total down here. So 589. So 589,000 in revenue and 567,000 in expenditures.
Okay, so Wendy, can I just ask for some clarification? Because I got a little confused there on the lines. So the total expenses for Barbara Roby are, to find that number, we have to add the total of line 13, 16, and 17?
So for the total state and local, you're going to add together line 15, 16, and 17.
Okay, and then the federal is separate. So, but if I just say I want to know total expenditures, it would be
Line
13. Okay. Okay. Got it.
Okay. One of the additional requirements that was added by the legislature was for them to determine if we spent more than or less than the amount allocated to the school for special education. So that's what this bottom right section is. So they're going to focus mostly on this last column, which is the different weights or state aid that's generated based on our student count for special ed. We need to add in the federal funds for IDEA and also some Medicaid revenues that we are reimbursed with. So in total, Barbara Roby generated 541,000 of revenues, but our actual spending was 729,000 just on special education at that campus. So for Barbara Roby, we spent 188,000 more on special ed than what the funding generated. And in that case, normally that 188,000, if it's not made up at another school, it's coming out of the gen ed, regular ed classrooms. So we're having to use general ed funding to pay for additional costs for special ed. And that's what the legislature is trying to look at, because that's one of the things they want to look at is special ed funding. So they wanted some data to be able to use to do that.
Okay, so just to recap that, Wendy, so you're saying, which I think we all already knew, that we're spending more on our special ed students and programs than we receive funding for. And the difference is either made up from excess operational funds that Barbara Roby does not have in this case. So Barbara Roby isn't one of those schools making up those funds, or it's coming out of other gen ed funding?
So it would be coming out of the maintenance and operation fund somewhere.
Okay.
So since we are spending more on special ed, you don't have additional funds to be able to hire more instructional assistants, hire more teachers, something like that.
Okay.
And you will see as you scan through these, there are some schools where the special ed funding is higher than their expenditures. But overall, once they're all added together, it's about $1.5 million that we're spending more on special ed than the funding generates.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify that we are spending more both because of services that we are required to provide, right? That are legally we're required to provide. And also because we choose to have smaller class sizes, or we choose, there are certain things that we choose to do. And then partially it's what we're legally responsible for. So that number is a combination of those two pieces of spending. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
And Wendy, just out of curiosity, when you said that the legislators were looking for more precise data. Are they thinking about revamping this? Is this on the docket for an overhaul to be brought forth?
It was on one of the proposals in front of them for this last year. And then they ended up doing the skinny budget. The last cost study for special ed, I think, was done back in the early 2000s. So they were trying to get some data and not have to wait to have another complete audit done. So this at least gives them some information by school.
Okay.
So Wendy, is this school level information something that you historically would look at, but wasn't required to be reported? Or is this a brand new kind of view for you to see as well?
So in the past, it was reported at a much higher level by school. So this is the first time it's been this detail. So it was just it was an exercise in how to best allocate expenditures, because I allocated maintenance costs different than transportation costs. And so to really look at each different line and determine how to allocate that out in the revenue allocation, that was all new for the first time this year.
Okay.
So I think it's great data.
And what pieces of information that are included here are flexible? So obviously transportation, it pretty much is what it is. I mean, we have a certain number of students that we transport and a certain number of buses and all that. But are there any categories on here that are more discretionary?
Discretionary as far as
Like
how we
spending,
spend
discretionary
it, or
spending.
I don't know how you would define that, because it's all the funds, it's maintenance and operations, it's all the funds together.
Which I understand. So I guess I don't know. So obviously, like if we just look at the categories across the top, I mean, salaries is what it is. Benefits, that's in relation to the salaries, retirement, health care, all those sorts of things.
Right.
And then I guess I don't know what the definitions or general, each of these, like dues and fees, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory, but is supplies strictly like classroom supplies? I mean, I don't need a detailed list. I'm just trying to get an idea of what's here, I guess.
So in supplies, if you go down that column, the first one would be classroom supplies. The next one could be nursing supplies, because it's supporting students. So it could be nursing, it could be psychologist tests. The next one's 2,200. So that is for instructional staff. So that is more training supplies for staff training. General administration would be at the superintendent's level. The next one for school administration would be supplies for the school's office. 2,500 would be the district office purchasing, finance, warehouse, and technology. 2,600 would be maintenance. So it would be either supplies for that campus, or I also then had to allocate supplies that were at a district level based on square footage. Transportation would be fuel costs would be in there. Also in the supplies for operational for 2,600 could be some of the utility money or utilities like the power, electric bills. Food service would be food service supplies. The purchase service column would be things like substitutes, because we contract out our substitutes. Some schools are going to have a contracted teacher in there, so some you'll see a little higher. Again, this is for students, so that could be a nurse could be contracted. For instructional staff, that generally would be more professional development, having someone come in and talk to them. And again, superintendent's level of professional services, the district office finance side, professional services and postage. Items like that would be in that 19,000. And then maintenance would be utility bills, trash, water bills are 2,500s. And then if they contract any repair services out. And then transportation, food service. Did that help?
Yes, that is helpful.
Okay.
I guess, Wendy, so, when I look at this from a board level, I mean, this is obviously a lot of information because this is just one school and we have this for every single school that's there. What are the things that you would recommend we look at? Or is this really just an exercise in this is now a requirement that we need to report? And we as board members should really still be focusing on the bigger picture, which I know you give us a nice breakdown in your presentation for the budget and where we are to budget numerous times every year. Or do you think there's some pieces of information that are here at the by school level that we should focus on or would be useful?
So I think the main thing as you go through these would be to look at overall, is the school operating efficiently and financially stable? And I think that will get you the picture of the school's too small. The revenues aren't supporting a school that's this small. So what do we need to do to increase the number of students at this campus? I think it'll just give you some little things like that.
Okay.
That you'll notice as you go through.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Wendy.
So, but overall, I thought it was great information. It was just, took a lot of time to get it together, but it is a lot of good information.
And then do you think that the principals will use this information, or is this something that you kind of go over with them and use it as like a management tool for the campuses as well?
I think we'll probably refer back to this as we're doing the budget for next year as a reference, just to see what's working, what isn't, what was the difference between campuses.
Okay.
Wendy, give me an example. You said, this might, one case scenario would be, it might be that you see a school is too small or there's not enough students there to support that. Show me or give me an example of where I would see that here, like in the revenues and the expenditures. How would what numbers should we be looking at in order to make all of that make sense?
Okay, so you have your student count up in the top right corner. And I've switched to Scott Libby for you. So Scott Libby has 381 students for last school year. So if we look at total federal and state expenditures, it's 4.5 million. And if we go down to look at how much revenue was generated, it's only 3.5 million. So Scott Libby is $1 million off. It's a little different than Barbara Roby was, it's a couple 100,000. We're talking $1 million now for this campus.
Okay.
And I want to just bring up Belen Soto. And Belen's a little different because it was the first year of Belen. So the expenditures are 6.8 million plus another over $1 million in construction. So even if we just look at this first 6.8 million for state and local expenditures, if we look at their revenue, you'll notice there's no revenue for classroom site fund or DAA because that's all prior year funding. So opening the campus, the revenue is only 5 million, but yet our expenditures were closer to 7, so about a $2 million cost. But that mostly is because we were opening the school, and they didn't have the prior year funding for the district additional assistance, classroom site fund, and other grants. So that's why we funded that difference, the majority of that difference, with the donations from the developers from prior years.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for explaining that. I just wanted to make sure that I understood kind of the correlation between those two numbers, and I understand now what you mean about the student count. I think another way that we could potentially use this data, just not only because I haven't seen it broken down this way before, is that the special ed and the funding formula that you have down in the bottom right-hand corner, where you start to see how much, these services are, and that's just one example, are actually costing us campus by campus. And, we have an amazing special ed department, but we're starting to see now, I think, campus by campus, how much it's really costing us over and above what we're actually being reimbursed in terms of funding. So I think, that can definitely help at a management level sort of figure out how we try and get that under control, because, the money's got to come from somewhere. Like you said, it's just going to come from, general education, M&O budget somewhere. And that's going to, we got to find a way to offset that. So anyway, thank you very much. These reports are really informative. Does anyone else have any questions, either specifically on this one she has up or any of the ones prior? No? Okay.
I do have a question actually. So, and this might be more for Superintendent Gunning. So my question is, who is accountable, or is there any sort of accountability associated with a campus operating at either a deficit or a surplus right now?
So that, I'll chime in first, Superintendent Gunning, if you want to take it. But the majority of the expenditures are salary and benefits. And then also the boundaries or how we change where students are. So it's really all at a district level.
Okay.
And trying to balance, where the population is, and how where we're placing our special ed programs also would impact that. So it's really at a district level.
Okay, that answers that question. I guess my kind of follow-up to that would be, is there useful information in here that we could use to, I guess, gain insight? And I think that's just going to come with, I'll spend some time now that you've gone through the report in some more detail and look through myself and see, and, I just wonder if the state is asking for this information at this level, is it something that we should be giving more time and attention to as well? And what sort of information can we get from this? I don't have an answer to that, but I just, it makes me curious at this point.
And this requirement is actually coming from the federal government. It's one of the requirements for grants to be able to be eligible for the grant funding. So it started at the federal level for transparency. The state then implemented the requirements. And then this is the first time that we're reporting with this much detail.
Okay, and this will be required in this format going forward, as far as you know?
Yes. They may tweak the format a little bit since this was the first year, but it worked pretty well, so.
Okay.
And
Great,
Kim, just to piggyback on what you were saying, I think even, trying to, now that Wendy has put the time and effort, because I'm sure this took weeks to put together, this is not, all of these numbers come from different places and different reports and having to pull all of this. So this is an extensive amount of work. But so I agree with how do we better use this, right? So that all of that energy doesn't go to waste. But I think in seeing this, it really sheds some light, Wendy, to your earlier point on school boundaries and where kids are and where our special education classrooms are located and things like that. I mean, this gives a pretty clear picture of the effects of just moving specific kids here and there to different schools. And I think for a long time, we've been focused, and rightfully so, on a different set of priorities in our school boundaries, never having seen any of this information and really seeing how different a student count can be on the bottom line of schools and how it affects, our overall, financial health as a district. So I agree, we should absolutely use these moving forward, specifically in that boundary conversation. And I know, Wendy, you've told us many times through those boundary efforts to, what the student count actually does, as it filters down. And I think this is a good representation of that. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, great. Thank you, Wendy, so much. I know this was a lot of work for you and your team to put together. So thank you for taking the time to explain it all to us, because it was, I will admit, a little overwhelming in our board packet, looking at all of this stuff and not really completely understanding it. So thanks for taking the time to walk us through it. So going back to our agenda, I will entertain a motion for the school level annual financial reports.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2020 school level annual financial reports as presented.
I second.
Okay, thank you, Kim, Melissa. I believe since this is the only thing, we can probably do an all in favor of. So motion on the floor is to approve the fiscal year 2020 school level annual financial reports. If there's no other conversation or questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, everybody, thank you. Any opposed? No. Okay, motion carries. And that leads us to the end of the meeting.
I motion to adjourn.
Yes, I will second that. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, motion carries. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope everyone has a very happy and safe holiday. Please remember to mask up, stay in your bubble, and have a very safe and happy holiday. And we will be back with you at our normal board meeting in